Brian Lackey. Here's some of my fucking observations about the current news. My approach to news is trying to be fair and empathetic and non-judgmental as possible, which is the exact opposite of what mainstream news does, and even a lot of independent news. I don't want to judge what's going on. I want to be empathetic to both sides and be fair to both sides. With this video, I'm far more interested in the psychosocial, cultural impacts of what's currently going on in the news. I will go over a little bit the history and reasons why it happened, but that's not what I'm primarily interested in. The headlines I will be discussing are the Russian-Ukrainian war, the death of Queen Elizabeth, and Trump's dalliances with the FBI. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine and Russia got along for a while, but that was fated not to last long, as Vladimir Putin was basically an imperialist at heart and wanted to take over as much of the former Soviet Union as possible. They have been basically in a small war since 2014, with pro-Russian Ukrainians and Russians involved in taking some areas, but nothing major like has happened recently. In recent months and years, Russia has become far more aggressive towards Ukraine because Ukraine has been asserting its independence as much as it can, generally. So in February 2022, they launched a major initiative against Ukraine to attempt to take it over. There have been anywhere from 10,000 to 27,000 casualties and deaths. So this is a very serious war. There's been a huge refugee crisis, one of the largest in many decades, and that is unfortunate as well. This is a war I hope that ends soon, and it's a horrible thing. War is always horrible, but let's try to understand the reasons and meanings behind all wars, or most wars, and look at this one specifically. Let's look at some of the psychosocial, cultural implications of this war and of all wars. Psychologically, war is very, very hard on everyone involved, including the invaders. A lot of times the people who do invade aren't really vested in doing it. They do it because they're basically forced to, or they joined the military hoping to do the right thing. PTSD, I'm sure, is common in the civilians involved and the military a lot, and who knows how that affects society in the decades to come. PTSD is a serious problem with wars. It used to be called shell shock when it came to the military, but we now know that it has devastating effects on the people and their families and probably society at large. I don't know how you would gauge that or measure it, but it undoubtedly has probably some major effect, especially the first probably decade after a severe war in a country that has been invaded and pummeled. The social impacts of war are pretty interesting because there's a lot of propaganda in war on both sides, and a lot of it's not always true, and it's made to arouse the general public in support of the war, and it often works. It's understandable. People want to believe they are part of a group, and they are, such as a nation. They want to believe that nation is doing the right thing, whether they are or not. So I'm sure a lot of Russians, in fact polls have shown so, that a lot of Russians are for the invasion, not all of them. And, you know, you can't really blame them because their country has taught them to be. Vladimir Putin's policies have taught them to be, and other government. It's not good to blame Russian citizens so much for the war, or even the military. The main person to blame would be Vladimir Putin and the people that are behind him. And I'm sure there's propaganda on the Ukrainian front as well. Of course, it's quite understandable. If you're invaded by another country, you're not going to like that, and for the most part be against it. And this is completely understandable. Cultural impacts can be quite severe and long-standing. Statues and historical landmarks get totally destroyed during war, and this can be horrible to the culture, as well as documents, records, libraries. These can all be very bad. A lot can be lost, which is unfortunate. And this can have an effect on a nation's national identity, and that can be devastating to the society as well. It's just going to affect the art of the country. There's going to be a lot about the war, a lot about the people who are involved in the war, some good, some bad. It's going to be films, music, you name it. It's going to affect the culture. And it's going to affect the culture many, many years. I mean, just think about the Cold War in America. How many movies during that period were anti-Russian? I'm sure it went to both sides, and it's on both sides. This is understandable, on both sides. That's what happens when there's a war. It affects everything about the society. It affects the people's state of mind. Social and cultural life are completely changed, or changed a lot. As far as why wars generally happen, it's pretty easy to understand. It's pretty simple, actually. It's based on tribalism. We're basically huge tribes now with billions of people. It usually has to do with money, resources, power, and control, which of course is also part of power. My main point about this is not necessarily the war, but about wars altogether. You should probably look at your nation's own past history, because they have probably invaded other countries or other areas to get power. They're killing people, they're threatening a nation's very identity and culture and society and their psychological well-being. But Vladimir Putin is doing what dictators do, and dictators seem to be a part of our natural human condition, and I'll be glad when they aren't, but they are. And that is something we have to understand and accept until it gets better. It's also interesting to note that Facebook is allowing some pro-violence posts against the Russian military and Vladimir Putin, including some posts calling for his assassination, and they generally don't do this. So you have to wonder what their motivation is there. So that's something worth noting. Social media can affect a lot of what's going on in the world. This has happened before in socio-political situations. So war is what it is. It's going to happen. We should do everything we can to put an end to it as a society, but we need to understand why it happens and why the people that perpetrate it do what they do. Otherwise, there will always be war. We need to come together as a society and understand this. And I hope that we can, and I hope the people that are listening to me right now and other people need to understand that peace is far more important than war, but war is going to stay here for a while unless we all come together and understand it better. For my next subject, I'm going to talk about the death of Queen Elizabeth. Now, first off, I have nothing against Queen Elizabeth. As a person, she seemed nice, she seemed funny. I guess instead of talking about the Queen's death, she was 95. It's not surprising. She was in poor health, and I don't like to see anybody die, but it's going to happen to people her age more than other people. What's more interesting to me is the pro-monarchy, anti-monarchy debate. It's pretty interesting that there's been a number of anti-monarchy protests after she died. The fact is probably that the Queen didn't have much power. She's more of a figurehead to bring together the nation as a whole. Although she did meet with the Prime Minister once a week, I don't know how much influence she had over policy through that, but it's possible she had more than we think. Maybe not. I don't think that England can declare war without the monarchy's approval either. So that, if that's true, then that's definitely some power, although they could easily be influenced by politicians, like the Prime Minister. For the most part, society has grown out of the idea of monarchy, although dictators are pretty much the same thing, although they don't call themselves king and queens. That's what they pretty much see themselves as, I would assume. So you can't blame the royals for being how they are. That's what they were born into, that's what they're used to. Some of them have been rebellious, like Prince Harry, and that's understandable too. We're coming to a time when the monarchy will probably vanish from the earth, I'd say within the next few hundred years. I could be wrong. I mean, it really serves no purpose other than dictatorial or figurehead reasons. So while it's sad to see the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, it also gives us a chance to look to the future and hope that the monarchy will not last forever, and it won't. I can understand the anti-monarchy protests, and I can understand being pro-monarchy. You want to have a sense of belonging, a national sense of belonging, and the royal family certainly provides that cohesion, and that's mainly why they're there now, and they've been that way for a while. I don't know. Of course, the King and Queen of England certainly used to have huge powers before democracy, and there's still some places that have kings and queens with a lot of power, I think. So, of course, Prince Charles is taking over now. He's in his 70s, I believe, so you never know about him either. I don't know who's next in line, if he has a brother or his children, I suppose. I don't keep up with the royal family business that much. It's interesting sometimes to hear about, especially the rebellious ones like Harry. But we'll just leave it at that. If you are pro-monarchy, if you loved your queen, hey, I get it. If you're anti-monarchy and you protest, no reason to get violent, so just state your opinion. Protest in the streets. That's your right. My final topic will be Trump's dalliances with the FBI. Such a bad boy. But we already knew that. And search Mar-a-Lago for the classified documents, and they did find some, and it's an ongoing deal. So let's discuss that a little bit. I don't know a lot of the history of it, and I don't really necessarily care. Let's talk about the why and the implications of it in a larger social context. So it's hard for me to believe that Trump is the only president to have taken classified documents. This can't be true, right? It's impossible. It's nearly impossible. It's got to have happened before. Maybe he took a whole lot more. Maybe he took things that were sensitive and they might be worried that you'd give them sensitive information to Russia or something. Well, there's no absolute proof that he had extreme ties with Russia, I don't think. I could be wrong. He could have. So I guess the question is, should he or shouldn't he not have taken those documents? We don't really know what they are, and some of the affidavit part of it's been redacted. So the problem is here, the government keeps anything from its citizens. This is not the way it's supposed to work in a democracy. There are probably millions and millions of pages, if not more, classified documents in the US. As far as I can see, why aren't they available to the public? I suppose because it has to do with secret operations, such as the CIA and intelligence. But why are we having secret operations and spying? This is ridiculous. This is not what democracy and society is supposed to be about. This is obviously also about power, corruption, resources, keeping the people in check, psyops. Look that up if you don't know what it is, which is completely natural. Governments are the leaders of people, and they're going to do what they think they need to do to protect themselves and sometimes to protect the people that they're in charge of, or that they're over, because those are the people that keep them in office in a democracy. The problem with that is a democracy is sometimes more like a shadow democracy, which is what I would call us, because the Democrats and Republicans rule the political landscape, not letting any third parties or independents in very much to the debates. And when they do get there, I'm sure they do everything they can to keep their influence squashed as much as possible behind the scenes. And this is normal, I understand. You got power, you got money, you got people you're aligned with, you want to stay with them. We've all done that with friends. We've all done that with family. But it's definitely not fair to the public. So maybe he shouldn't have taken the documents, and maybe he was going to do nefarious things with them. And in that case, if it was going to be something that could hurt the American public, he definitely should not have taken them. Where this is going to go, I have no idea. Is he going to be put in prison? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. He seems to be able to get out of almost anything that he gets in trouble for, which is kind of impressive. Especially since so many people are against him. Do I agree with everything he's done? Do I agree with a lot of things he's done? Definitely not. And would I rather him not be president again? I would rather him not, but that's a judgment call. I'm trying to be non-judgmental. The situation is what it is. It's not entirely surprising. He is who he is. Then that's perfectly fine. We all are who we are. But anyway, this really tells us something more about our society than it does about Trump. There are too many things that are left secret about our government, and this is not a good thing. Just another indication of control and power. And these are natural. But if we keep on this path, then it's not going to be good for the future. If we're going to continue to be violent and secretive, it's not going to be good for our society in the long run. And we can already see this happening sometimes. And if it becomes too bad in these circumstances, then empires, which we are, can fall. And we better be careful about that. And Russia, as far as I'm concerned, is not the biggest threat to us, but probably China. Although we're so in bed with China in so many different ways, it's probably not going to happen or happen anytime soon that they could even try to do anything militarily against us, although I'm sure they engage in cyber war against us. But we have so much vested interest in our alliance with China that we don't do much to upset it. As you can see with us not really interfering with North Korea very much. They're so bad in human rights issues. And China is somewhat allied with them, so we don't fuck with North Korea as much as we might if they weren't aligned with China. But remember that we shouldn't judge, we should be more empathetic and understanding about why people do what they do, including governments. If we get to understand that more, then we can make society better rather than watching the mainstream news. You shouldn't do much of that, it's bad for you. It'll make you feel like shit. I don't read a lot of headlines. I do, and I start feeling like shit. I certainly do news shows like this and become more in depth. If that's what you guys like, then I'm perfectly willing to do that. But I'm going to look at it from a perspective that you hardly ever see, which is an empathetic, non-judgmental perspective. If that's something you're looking at it not in a nonpartisan way and in those other ways, then I will be glad to keep talking about news subjects, news headlines. And I thank you very much for watching this, and I appreciate you looking at things through a different perspective by watching my video. That means a lot to me, and I hope we can see a whole lot more of that in the future. So, Once again, thanks for watching and chilling with me. I appreciate it. Have a great fucking day from yours truly, another fucking YouTuber. Later. I know, comrade. The Queen was having an affair with Trump. But after all, they are two consenting adults. Let them do what they want. Chill. Everything's gonna be okay. Promise. Did I leave this on?